Hello, my name's Lauren and I lead the IG Schools team at Inside Government. And today I'm joined by Ian Bauckham CBE, who's the CEO of the 10X Schools Trust and also chair of the Oak National Academy. And today we're going to be talking a bit more about the Oak National Academy and in particular how the Academy is working to reach and support disadvantaged pupils and how teachers and school leaders can best utilise the Academy in their efforts to ensure a quality education offer for these children and young people through this time of COVID-19. So thank you very much for joining us, Ian, and perhaps you can kind of start by giving a quick introduction about your background, role and expertise, and then tell us a bit more about how the Oak National Academy kind of came to be established.
Sure, yeah. So my background is as a teacher and a head teacher. As Lauren said in her introduction, I run a trust of primary and secondary schools based in the southeast of England across Kent and East Sussex. And I became involved in the Oak National Academy immediately on its formation, which happened really over the Easter holidays of 2020. So that was just within a fortnight of the general school closure kicking in, which, as everybody knows, happened from the 23rd of March onwards. And it was clear, I think, probably fairly early on that there was a range of responses in the sector to the likelihood that schools were going to be closed for a good number of weeks, and as has turned out to be, months. So some were very well equipped to provide very sophisticated, comprehensive learning platforms from the word go, but it was clear that there was quite a lot of reinventing of the wheel going on around the country, and also that some schools were less well positioned in terms of capacity to be able to provide that comprehensive remote education service that came to be seen as the gold standard. So over the Easter holiday, a group of educational leaders from around the country came together, and the idea of forming a national remote school was born. The work happened at incredible pace over the Easter holiday, and the idea, to put it very simply, was to try to replicate the classroom experience for children by providing live lessons with real-life talking teachers across the full range of subjects from year R in primary right the way through Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3, and up to and including year 10 across the range of subjects that pupils would normally be learning in school. And most of the teaching was provided free of charge by the schools and trusts that were collaborating to offer the academy services to schools, and it was pitched as something that schools could point their classes, their pupils to, rather than being something as pitched directly into the living rooms of parents and families. I mean, obviously, because it's free at the point of use, anybody can access it. In fact, there are pupils and families going to it directly, as well as schools purposefully directing their pupils to it. But it's been tremendously successful. I don't know, Lauren, if it'd be useful for me to give you some up-to-date stats on use as it is at the middle of July before we move on. So as at today, and we're recording this discussion on the 14th of July, we've had 19 million lessons taken since we opened on the 20th of April. We've had 800,000 families watching our assemblies. So we offer 2 assemblies each week, actually, a non-religious assembly on a current theme. And we've had some big name speakers there, including, for example, the Duchess of Cambridge. And we also offer a weekly religious assembly, which is contributed to by all the major faiths represented in the UK. So 800,000 families have watched our assemblies. We're offering lessons across 23 different subjects. That's some 2,500 lessons every week. We're reaching about 4.7 million pupils. And because all of our lessons include quizzes, so baseline quizzes at the beginning of lessons to establish how much pupils know of the content that's going to be taught in the lesson, and then completion quizzes to see how much they've understood in the lesson at the end of the lesson. we've had about 10 million completed quizzes across all of our subjects, which is giving us about 50 million answers. So that's 50 million bits of data, each of which represents a pupil response. So we've got an enormous database of pieces of information that tells us how well children are learning from the lessons that we're offering them.
Fantastic, thank you. That's really, really interesting. And yeah, fantastic to know how much data is being collected as part of that process. And I'm sure that's going to be really useful going into the next academic year as well. Yeah, incredible results so far.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
well done.
I mean, actually, the academy has got the potential, as well as being an enormously valuable learning resource for pupils, families, and schools. It's actually got the potential also to be probably one of the world's biggest education laboratories. So one of the things we've done recently is introduced a how do you feel question at different stages in lessons. So at different parts of the lessons, pupils can say whether they feel, for example, frustrated or satisfied or happy or proud or whatever. And because we can correlate that feeling to different bits of the lesson, we can begin to collect data on how difficult the content is perceived as being at different parts of the lesson to pupils, which again, I think adds to our understanding of how pupils are responding to the content. And if you think that you've got the number of pupils that we've got, literally hundreds of thousands using the lessons at any given time, if you were to want to experiment with a new pedagogical approach, for example, introduce it, you could then monitor how pupils were responding to it and compare it with how they were responding to other approaches. So you've got the potential to be able to conduct some quite large scale educational research using the platform, as well as all its other real benefits for pupils in their learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And so is that data, is that information being used at the moment to try anything new or change, any adaptive, learning is going on, or
yeah,
so we're working.
So we're really interested in developing this. I mean, it's easy to forget just how young we are as an academy. So, we haven't even done one term yet. We're talking in the middle of July. We haven't even got to the end of term. So, everything is in the early stages, but we're certainly having active conversations with the Education Endowment Foundation about how education research can play into the work we're doing and benefit from the very large numbers of pupils we've got engaging with our learning at any given time.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's really good to know, and really exciting as well to see kind of how it does progress further.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in terms of kind of disadvantaged pupils in particular, how do you kind of think COVID-19 has impacted these pupils so far, and are you getting any indication from the data itself about that? And then how is the academy kind of helping these pupils in particular and trying to tackle this attainment gap that will inevitably be developing?
So I think there's probably several things to say about that. I mean, nobody knows how the current round of school closures is going to have impacted pupils from different kinds of background. And we won't know that probably for at least 6 months to a year after schools reopen. But we do have research from around the world about other periods of school closure. For example, there was quite a lot of research done on the basis of the closures in the Greater Christchurch area of New Zealand after the earthquakes there just under a decade ago. And that research indicated what I suppose some people would say is common sense, which is that when schools close, educational gaps widen. In other words, those from least advantaged backgrounds fall behind faster than those from more advantaged backgrounds, which, again, looks like common sense, but it's always useful to have these things backed up in research. So there's a reasonably strong reason for believing that will have happened here in this country during this period of closure as well. One of the motivating factors behind putting the academy together in the first place in the Easter holiday was that it was becoming clear quite early on that where schools served particularly disadvantaged communities, they were often least able to find the capacity to put together comprehensive remote teaching platforms. So we think that probably in terms of provision, there was a difference between the most advantaged and the least advantaged communities in terms of what could be offered. Then, of course, there is the question of the domestic setting in which disadvantaged pupils found themselves. So fewer access to facilities, quiet places to study, access to technology, adults in the family setting who were able to support, encourage, structure the day for them. So we were aware that all of that was going on, and there wasn't much we could do as a group of educators in the Easter holiday to change the domestic settings that pupils were in. But one thing we could do was do something about the provision that was being offered. So one of the reasons why we wanted to do it was to make sure that the best comprehensive remote platforms that you see in the schools with greatest capacity in the country were actually available to everybody. We wanted to make that a national offering. So, that was an important thing to have done. We tried to follow the research wherever we could on this, and the research that we've got about what makes effective teaching in the classroom is strong, and we know that what's good teaching in the real classroom is also good teaching in the remote context. There's very little difference. The Education Endowment Foundation did some studies right at the beginning of the period of school closure that basically concluded that the medium of transmission is less important than the structure of the teaching. So teaching which builds on prior learning, breaks down new content into small chunks, explains it clearly to pupils so they understand it, and gives them the opportunity to practice and apply it so that they can remember it. All of that is important, whether the teacher is in the live classroom or in the virtual classroom. And those are the things that make the biggest difference to the least advantaged. The least advantaged pupils are most sensitized to bad teaching and benefit most immediately from good teaching because they have less resilience. So just by providing a high quality platform with really strong evidence-based teaching, we think we were doing the best we possibly could to minimize the widening of gaps during the period of closure. It doesn't deal with the issue of access to technology, and it doesn't deal with the problem of having a quiet workspace in the home and encouraging adults in the home. That was a little bit outside of our remit. I mean, the only thing I can tell you is that about 15%, 15%, of that very large number of OAK lessons being accessed via a mobile phone. Which may feel surprising to some people, and if you're old like me and you've got old eyes, the thought of staring at a teacher speaking on a mobile phone for 3, 4 or 5 hours a day might feel quite daunting, but the reality is that 15% of our lessons are regularly being accessed via a phone, and we know that even in houses that don't have multiple laptops, multiple workstations for different family members to use, there are normally 2 or 3 smartphones around the house which can be used if needs must to access our lessons.
Thank you. And so are there any provisions for for any access for pupils that don't have a smartphone even, let alone a laptop? Does everything kind of require that technology? Is anything being rolled out, via schools, maybe, paper-based that schools are able to take from the Oak National Academy?
Yeah, so I mean, this is going a little bit beyond the Oak National Academy. The Oak National Academy is an online school. Yeah. So what we're not doing is providing paper-based versions of it. However, what we know is going on is that that schools have remained open for vulnerable pupils throughout the period of closure. The rates of take-up were quite low in the first part of the closure, but have grown quite markedly since then and are now getting much stronger. It's proven quite difficult for schools to maintain really good quality remote provision and at the same time cater for their vulnerable pupils in school. So we know a number of schools are supporting their pupils who they do have attending to access the curriculum via OAK using the school's own facilities. So that's one thing that can be done and is being done in some circumstances. I mean, certainly speaking just for a moment, not as the chair of OAK, but just as a school and trust leader, one of the things we've done is insisted that all our laptop, all our mobile devices are distributed to families where we know there's insufficient access to remote learning devices. So, you know, most primary schools have got, you know, a stash of 30 or 60 or 90 laptops. We've got all of those at the moment in families where we know that there may not be sufficient access to remote devices already. So that's just speaking a little bit aside from my role in OAK.
Yeah, thank you. And that, you know, that's really good to hear. And to say, I'm sure that many school leaders will have been really trying to do the same and rolling out that access as much as possible as well. And so thinking kind of through the summer and into September, the next academic year, what can school leaders and teachers and other practitioners be doing now to start preparing for September, and what's going to be needed then? And maybe even, you know, that might include any catch-up activities through the summer as well. But what can be kind of done now to start preparing later this year?
Yeah, so I think there are probably several things to say there. First of all, the OAK lessons are going to remain available during the summer. So anybody that feels they've got a little bit behind with any curriculum subjects over the summer will be able to access the remote provision on OAK over the summer to do some catch up. So that opportunity is there. We're doing something quite exciting at OAK at the moment. We're aiming to put together a full year's worth of videoed lessons across all subjects from year R right up to GCSE year 11. We're putting that together over this summer, and that's going to be launched in its entirety in September. And part of the rationale for doing that is really to provide some resilience for schools and the system. So although I think probably all of us who lead and work in schools hope that schools will be back to some sort of normal. It won't be quite normal, but some sort of normal from September onwards. You know, events in parts of the country, for example, in Leicester at the moment, indicate that that's by no means certain in all parts of the country, and we can't rule out the possibility of further disruption. So contingency planning is an important thing that school leaders will need to be doing, along with all the other things they're trying to do at the moment. And we think at OAK that we can make a contribution to that and support them with that contingency planning by making sure that they've got a full suite of videoed lessons, and those lessons are recorded against a published curriculum map, so they can see exactly where the curriculum is going, what is planned to be done all the way through the school year. They've got that available that they can fall back on in the event of any further disruption. I mean, I guess going a little bit further than that, one of the things that I very much hope as schools consider doing is looking at those curriculum maps and thinking about shifting their own curricula where appropriate in the direction of the published OAK curriculum map. So teaching the OAK curriculum in the real classroom, perhaps supported by the videoed lessons that we've got for each part of that curriculum. Because what that will do is, first of all, mean that if the school does have to close, the curriculum can carry on uninterrupted remotely because the lessons will all be there. It also becomes a training tool, so it's a professional development opportunity for staff to see another teacher teaching the same material that they're teaching, learn from that, share ideas, becomes professionally developmental. Yeah, and just adds that layer of resilience to the system in case of further disruption. So that's all about contingency planning. I mean, if you want me to say something more widely about other things that school leaders should be doing, it's quite difficult to know where to start, because they've got such a list of jobs to do in terms of making sure that schools are safe for reopening, ready to welcome pupils back. And I think also ready to tackle some of the legacy problems from this period of closure that inevitably they'll encounter. So, you know, we've heard a lot about mental health problems that may have arisen, a backlog of issues to do with, you know, potential safeguarding concerns that may have arisen during the closure. So school leaders are going to be very busy thinking about all of those things in September, which I guess is one of the reasons why we want to make life easy for them on the curriculum front, offer them a fully planned curriculum with those videoed lessons to support alongside.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And as you say, schools definitely will, but school leaders in particular will be facing so many issues that I'm sure having this, you know, wide bank of resources to fall back on will be, you know, a godsend really.
Yeah.
But just on the curriculum, and I know Matt Hood has written a little bit about this as well, but
Yeah.
how well aligned will the Oak National Academy curriculum be to what, you know, most, if not all, schools will have been teaching already or expect to have been teaching next year? How is that kind of measuring up against each other?
Yeah, so I mean, most schools in England follow the national curriculum. Academies are not technically obliged to, but the majority of them offer curricula which are quite closely aligned to the national curriculum. In some subjects, particularly, for example, primary maths and English, the national curriculum is quite a detailed document. So we've got a fairly close idea of what is being taught in subjects like English and maths, particularly through Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, and we're completely aligned with that. We are offering the national curriculum in those subjects. In other subjects, and particularly as you move into Key Stage 3, the national curriculum is more of a top-level document. It doesn't give the stage-by-stage detail. It's more focused on some top-level learning directions or outcomes. So for subjects like that, we've tried to offer the curriculum flexibly in sort of a unit or modules, if you like, that teachers can take and put together to make a curriculum which suits the context of their school, or perhaps reflects some aspects of the planned curriculum that they had before. Obviously, the order in which things are done is quite critical. In some subjects, you've got to do one thing before you can do the next thing. Otherwise, the next thing won't make sense because you haven't done the thing before. So we do offer some suggested routes through the curriculum to support schools in their thinking about sequencing. But, you know, the bottom line is schools could take aspects of the Oak curriculum and build those into their own curricula in a flexible way to suit their needs. So, you know, it may be, for example, if you take the Key Stage 3 English curriculum, which the English literature curriculum that focuses on the teaching of certain works of literature, you wouldn't have to do all of it in the order that we suggest. You could just take the units that are on one or two books and integrate those with work that you've already got on other books, if you think that's going to extend and develop the offering that you've got. And you would then have a fully functional set of videoed resources to go with whatever you decided to adopt from the Oak curriculum. So we've tried to recognise the need to be flexible wherever we can, particularly in subjects where the national curriculum is not itself very detailed and sequenced as it is in primary maths, for example.
Yeah, I think that'd be really useful to say. I think that, you know, the key really is going to be flexibility for at least the next academic year, maybe even longer. Yeah. So that'll definitely be really useful. Yeah. Thank you. So we'll include a link obviously to the Academy underneath this recording, but I'm sure most people will be very familiar with that link by now.
thenational.academy. That's it, very easy. thenational.academy.
Brilliant. But are there any other resources that you wanted to kind of share, or any final points that you'd like to make today?
No, I would just say, you know, go ahead, have a look at what Oak has got to offer. Give yourself an hour to just explore the resources, look at the different year groups, look at the different subjects. I think we're learning all the time. We were initially very much an emergency response. So It is certainly possible, and I'd be the first to admit this, that you can go into some of the early lessons, and if you look hard enough, you may find things that are not quite right, not quite as perfect as you would like them to be. But you know, we were working absolutely on the hoof in late April to produce an emergency response to be of support for schools. I think we've learned a lot, as all of us have, during this period of closure, and we're absolutely focused on upping the game in terms of quality and accuracy all the time. That's our number one focus, quality and accuracy. So as we move into the new school year from September, once we've got the new set of lessons up and ready, we will be taking down this term's lessons and just running with the lessons designed for next year. And you know, we're really aiming to make sure we continually drive that quality and accuracy bar upwards. So by all means, go and look at what's there now. There's some really great stuff. Don't write to me if you find something that's not perfect. Just wait until September, and I promise you that in September we're going to have some great quality lessons, great quality curriculum delivery there for you to use flexibly to help you with your workload, your planning and your contingency planning.
Fantastic, thank you. And thanks so much for your insight today. It's been really, really useful, really interesting. And I'm sure many of those working in schools will, you know, be really grateful to hear a bit more and hear some of these updates, particularly around how the Academy is and can help to support you know, the least advantaged pupils.
It's been great talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah,
you might be interested to know the vast majority of our users are in England, but you might be interested to know that we do have quite a cluster of users in Wales, as well as in Scotland and other parts of the world. So there's interest from around the UK and elsewhere in the world in the work we're doing.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's really good to know. Well, all the best with your ongoing work now over the summer to get things ready for September. And thanks again for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.